Hello, my name is Miriam Thomas, and in the course of Administration in Ministry Context, I'm going to present to you the artifact of my Honduras missions trip that I led in July of 2025, and this is for Performance Indicator 3.3.1. And so in this artifact, I will present several topics. The first, I will go over the missions ministry objectives, the Honduras missions trip as a whole, the missions trip budget, and then what the missions trip final cost came to, and then I will conclude. So missions ministry objectives. At the church that I was attending that I led the missions trip for, it was Calvary Christian Church in Lynnfield, Massachusetts. They have several missions objectives for that church. The first one is commit to pray. It is committing to pray for missions, committing to pray for the nations. Missions is really big in that church, and so the idea is that everybody would play a part in missions, whether it's praying or going on a trip. The idea is that everybody would pray. Everybody would pray for the nations. Everybody would pray for missions as a whole, the missionaries. The second objective for the missions is to commit to give. Give to missions, and at the church, they support several missionaries, several hundred missionaries, over 600 to be exact, and I believe it's 685 missionaries. And so all the money that you give to missions supports these missionaries on a monthly basis. The third objective for missions for the church is commit to go. Commit to go to a short-term missions trip or long-term missions. Maybe you feel called to be a missionary. And so they really advise everybody to go on a missions trip at least once, and really to feel out if that's your calling to be a missionary. And lastly, the objective of the missions in the church is to commit to know about the thousands of unreached people groups there are across the world, and to know what it's like to be a missionary, to feel as if that's something that you wish to go. And so in July of 2025, I led a trip to Honduras. One of the missionaries or missionary support groups that the church sponsors is Children's Impact Network. They have several homes across the world. This one particularly was in Honduras, and they have a home for abused, abandoned, and neglected children. The idea of the missions trip was to support and love on the children, and also to do construction on the Children's Impact Network property. The construction that was going to be done was for to build an extra set of housing so that future missionaries can go and stay there instead of staying at a hotel. The other part of the missions trip was to visit 9 home visits in the community, and then also have 3 sidewalk Sunday school events. This is where we as a team go towards the community and plan on whether it's worshiping and playing games and handing out toys. That way people in the community can just come to these events and get to know who Jesus is. So for the missions trip budget, there are several items on the budget. The first one, which was one of the most important ones, is the flight. It's really unpredictable. Flights change day to day. But what I did was I coordinated with the travel consultant. This travel consultant has been used on missions trips before, so he understood the goal and what the plan was and how it works. And so the idea was that we would talk to him early on in the planning process, close to almost a year, a little bit later than a year, maybe 10 months before the missions trip, just to get an idea of approximately what he thought the budget would be. And so the budget that he gave me was approximately $1,000 a person for the flight, a round trip flight. and that included the insurance, that included everything for the flight. Children's Impact Network charges $8.75 a person. That includes food, which is 3 meals a day, and the hotel. There's also an administration fee that I did charge. I brought 24 people, including myself, on this trip, and so I wanted to make sure, and especially since this was my first trip, I wanted to make sure that every T was crossed, every I was dotted. And so we had an administrator that came on the trip with us, that her gifting is administration. So she did all the administrative tasks, like making sure everybody's passport was up to date, making sure the background check was up to date, everything that was needed step by step, she took care of it. And so we decided to pay her $100 per person, and so that money basically came out off of her trip cost. And we also needed airport food because Children's Impact Network was providing the food for the trip once we arrived, but there was also we knew there would be a layover. We're leaving from Boston, and there's no direct flights from Boston to Honduras, so we knew there'd be at least one layover. So we discussed that. I decided after much prayer that $15 per person per flight, $60 total. So there would be 2 flights, so $15 per flight right before the flight. Then people can pick up lunch, breakfast, dinner, whatever time that was. And we felt $15 was good enough for a meal. So on this slide, you can see the final trip cost. So after the budget, after I looked at the budget for a while, and after a lot of prayer, definitely, I did decide that the budget would be $2,000 a person. There was a few hiccups. I think that to explain this Excel sheet, on the bottom you see Marissa. She unfortunately was unable to raise the $2,000. She raised $540.99, and so she was unable to raise that. So none of the money. So she wasn't able to go because she didn't raise the money. Also, I believe it's the 6th person down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is Marlene. She raised the $2,000, but unfortunately she had an emergency surgery, and so I only charged her for the price for Honduras because we paid that really early on, so that $8.75 to the Children's Impact Network, and then the flight was already bought. She had to have the emergency surgery really last minute, a couple days ahead of time, so unfortunately we did have to charge her for that. And so what ended up happening was once we bought the flight, the tickets were all different prices, but we decided, after much thought, I decided to just average everything out because there was kids involved and those were a little bit cheaper. So the cost of the flight ended up being about $710. So that with the $8.75, that came to the $16.46, and so that Marlene, we did have to charge her for that. Everybody else, you can see that there was, I charged $2,000. So this sheet says the first name and their last name. Some of them had kids, so you'll see that number. Some of them were just 2 people. The second was Amy and Matt. They have 2 kids, so there was a total of 4 of them that went. Sheila and Ethan, there was 2 of them, so it was $4,000 budget. The other difference in here was Amy and Matt. Amy was my admin, and so I did deduct some money from her budget because everybody gave $100 for all of her work with the administration costs. So her budget was a little bit cheaper. Myself, Jerome, and Miriam Thomas, we have 5 kids that went, so there was a total of 7 of us, and so it was $14,000. And so some people gave a little bit more. So you can see under mine, I gave $14,300 because my budget, I was raising money online, and some people gave money even after I had finished raising it before I could shut down the website. So I did end up giving more. So everybody had made their budget that went, and so what ended up happening is you see the return amount that is the amount of money that we spent. That we spent per person, and the budget was $2,000 a person. But since the ticket prices were so much cheaper and we had some leftover money, the accounting department in our church, they told me the final leftover remaining money. And so I was able to deduct the money that was there and divide it up and have a total number of what everybody was getting back per person. And so this total number, the 380,178, that is a total for Vanya and Paul together. The $1,663.56 is for Amy and Matt's whole family. So I divided it into families, and you'll see by the next slide. So on this screen, this gives the total amount, the $6,926.84. That number came back from accounting, and so the number is the total amount that was left over. So everybody gave the $2,000. Some people ended up giving a little bit more than what their individual budget consisted of, and then there was extra money there. And then not everybody used the $15 at the airport per trip. So there was extra money. So there was a total of $6,926.84. Also, we budgeted for about $1,000 airfare, and then there was leftover from that. So what I did is I subtracted Marissa's money, which is $540.99. I subtracted that because she didn't go on the trip. We didn't spend any money on her. We knew right away that she wasn't going to go, so we subtracted that. We also subtracted Marlene's money. Unfortunately, because it was so close, I did have to pay the Children's Impact Network, and I also had to pay the airfare. I did give her the resources that hopefully she was able to get some of that money back once she supported with the letter of her medical costs, but from her budget to what was spent on her, the subtraction of that after was $354. So that went back to her, so I subtracted that from the amount, and then I subtracted Amy Mastro. She spent an additional $900. She was my admin, so she wasn't sure exactly how much it was going to come to, depending on how many people went, so she ended up giving an extra $900, so that went back. And Andrea, $250, Stephanie, 40 cents, and myself, I'm Miriam Thomas, and we gave an extra $300. That $300 came because we did all of our donations online, and we asked for donations there, and so some people gave money after we had already met our budget and before I could shut it down. And so all of that money, after I subtracted that, it came to $4,581.45. There's 24 people who went, so I divided that number by 24, got $190.89, and that went per person for everybody. If you paid a little extra over budget, you got that included. For example, Andrea paid an extra $250, so she got the $190.89 plus $250. So everybody, it all worked out. It took me a while to just make sure and triple check my work. It's dealing with a lot of money, and so I definitely prayed on it, and I also sent this to my admin and went over this with her, made sure that she was all set. And so when I say that the money got returned, it actually didn't get returned to them because this went to missions. So what happens is that everybody has a choice with any leftover money. They can give it to a missionary, which nobody in this trip chose to do that. What everybody chose to do is to keep it. And so when I say keep it, that means that the church holds an account for them for 3 years. And then they can use that money for a future missions trip. If after 3 years they haven't used it, then it automatically goes into the general missions budget for the church. But everybody usually uses that money. So in conclusion, for the Honduras missions trip, Really, the objective was to reach the unreached. And I feel that that was accomplished. We spent so much time when we were on the missions trip with the children, doing construction, doing sidewalk Sunday schools, going to home visits. We were just going, going, going. We also had time to debrief, time to have devotionals in the morning, and also we had some free time and time to relax. So it was definitely a wonderful trip, but our goal to reach the unreached, it definitely happened. And prayer happened before I led the trip all the way until I finished giving the budget. And it was all throughout. This was definitely meant to happen, and it only happened because of prayer. And so I definitely appreciate God and who He is for allowing this trip to happen and allowing us to be able to reach the unreached. Really, the biggest thing in terms of a ministry budget, after you know that this is the ministry that you're going to participate in this case it is the Honduras missions trip, and after prayer is, or continually, and after prayer has started, the biggest thing is to plan ahead. Whatever ministry it is, plan ahead with the budget. If it's going to cost money, if it's going to cost, it doesn't matter how much, make sure it's planned ahead so that you can plan, and as things change, then you can adjust, but at least you have a plan to start with. The other thing is to communicate with the ministry members, everybody who's, in this case, it was the missions trip. So communication was a must. We had a WhatsApp group that we communicated with all the time. We had monthly meetings. As it got closer, we had weekly meetings. And so that was all to communicate, make sure everybody was on the same page. If the prices went up, we talked about it. If the prices of flights went down, we talked about it. And just let everybody continually know what was going on. But the biggest part is trusting God. This could only happen by trust and by faith. So we trusted God that everything was going to work out, that we left with the right amount of people, we came back with the right amount of people, and everything happened wonderfully. Also, giving Him the glory. We gave Him the glory every step of the way, and was so grateful that lives were touched. We saw people come to Christ. Whole households came to Christ from this experience. It was just such a wonderful time. So grateful, and such a wonderful trip that I do plan on leading another trip to Honduras, doing the same exact thing again this next October of 2026. And that is the end of this artifact. Have a great day.